My boss's son fired me to fund his lavish lifestyle, calling me dead weight in front of my entire team. He didn't know I secretly owned the supply chain his company depended on. One signature later, I froze his assets and watched his empire crumble. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens when the tables finally turn. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The humiliation didn't happen in a scream. It happened in a whisper, accompanied by the wet, slurping sound of a straw hitting the bottom of a plastic cup. I was standing at the whiteboard, a red marker in my hand, midway through outlining the Q4 logistics projections. I had been speaking for 20 minutes, detailing how we had shaved 12% off our shipping overheads through a route consolidation plan I had personally spent 3 months negotiating. The room was attentive. My team, good people, tired people, were taking notes. The air conditioner hummed with that familiar, low-grade vibration that had been the soundtrack to my life for 12 years. Then the glass door slid open without a knock. Bradley Whitmore walked in. He didn't look like an executive. He looked like he was on his way to a yacht club luncheon that had started 3 hours ago. He was wearing tailored chinos that cost more than my first car and a crisp, white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up just enough to show off a watch that was heavy enough to anchor a small boat. He didn't apologize for the interruption. He didn't even look at me. He just walked to the side of the room, leaned against the very whiteboard I was presenting on, obscuring the data I had just written, and took a long, bored sip of a thick, green pistachio smoothie. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence of prey sensing a predator who didn't know how to hunt but had been given a loaded gun. "Bradley," I asked, my voice steady, though my grip on the marker tightened until my knuckles turned white. "We're in the middle of the weekly ops review. Did you need something?" He pulled the straw from his lips, made a face like the smoothie was too cold, and finally looked at me. His eyes were empty, glazed over with unearned confidence. "Yeah, Sarah, I do," he said. His voice was loud, projecting to the back of the room, designed to carry. "I've been looking at the org charts with the transformation team, and honestly, I don't get why we still have legacy staff cluttering up the payroll." He took another sip, the sound echoing in the silent room. "It's like carrying dead weight," he said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "We need to be leaner, younger, less stale." No one laughed. No one moved. The air was sucked out of the room. My team stared at their laptops at the table, anywhere but at me. They were terrified. They knew who his father was. They knew that Bradley was the CEO's son, the transformation consultant. A title that was corporate code for "we can't make him CEO yet because the legal department threatened to quit, so we gave him a fake job to let him play boss." "Dead weight," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Exactly," Bradley smirked, a jawline sharp enough to slice empathy. "Anyway, wrap this up. We need the room for a vision boarding session at 2. He pushed off the whiteboard, leaving a smudge of hand grease on my projections, and sauntered out. I stood there. I was the director of strategic fulfillment. I had built this company's supply chain from the ground up before Bradley was even out of whatever Ivy League fraternity had taught him that smirk. 12 years. 3 national crises. 1 multi-million-dollar acquisition I personally brokered during the pandemic, taking calls at 3:00 a.m. in a hospital waiting room while my father died in hospice care. Bradley didn't know any of that. He didn't ask. He didn't care. To him, I was just a line item on a spreadsheet he didn't understand. "Sarah," one of my junior analysts whispered, her voice trembling. I capped the marker. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Meeting adjourned," I said. My voice didn't shake, which was a miracle. "Email me your reports by end of day." I didn't look at them. I couldn't. If I made eye contact, I would crumble. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the gray carpet, maintaining a perfect, professional posture until I reached the hallway. Then, I walked faster. I bypassed my office and went straight to the executive washroom. I locked the door, dropped my bag on the sink, and sat on the toilet seat like a war widow in a silk blouse. I stared at the black tile floor, trying to force air into my lungs. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. I counted the cracks in the grout. 1, 2, thr. 12 cracks, one for every year I had bled for this place. I had seen layoffs before. I had been in the room when we had to shave entire departments off the books like fat from a steak. It was brutal, but it was business. This was different. This was personal. This was a child playing with matches in a house I had built. I wasn't just next. I was already gone. He just hadn't filed the paperwork yet. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It wasn't just that I was losing my job. It was that I was being discarded by a boy who had never worked a day in his life, erasing a legacy I had sacrificed everything to build. I stayed in that bathroom for 14 minutes. When I finally stood up, I washed my face with cold water, reapplied my lipstick, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired. The lines around my eyes were deeper than they had been a year ago. Gray hairs were fighting a winning war at my temples. "Dead weight," I whispered to the glass. I walked back to my desk. The office was buzzing with that frantic, hushed energy that always follows a public execution. People were typing too loudly, walking too quickly, avoiding looking toward the executive wing. There was a yellow sticky note on my computer monitor. "Bradley wants to see you at 4:00 p.m. It was happening. He wasn't even going to wait until Friday. He was going to do it today, probably so he could leave early for happy hour. I picked up my phone and texted my husband, Mark. "Me, looks like it's happening. The axe is falling at 4. 3 dots bubbled up instantly. "Mark, I'm sorry, honey. I'll chill the champagne or the shotgun. You tell me which one we need when you get home." I almost smiled, almost. I spent the next 2 hours quietly forwarding personal files to my private cloud. I deleted my browser history. I organized my desk, not because I wanted to make it easy for them, but because I refused to leave a mess. I would leave as I had arrived, impeccable. At 4:00 p.m. sharp, I walked into the glass conference room, the one with the view of the city skyline I used to love. Bradley was already seated at the head of the table. Flanking him were 2 HR representatives I vaguely recognized, sitting stiffly like pallbearers at a funeral for someone they didn't like. One of them, a woman named Janice, had that overly polite, pained smile HR people wear when they are about to end your mortgage payments. "Sarah," Bradley said, gesturing to a chair like we were old high school friends catching up over coffee. "Sit. Thanks for coming in." I sat. I didn't lean back. I kept my hands folded on the table. "Let's be honest," Bradley started, clasping his hands together. "You've been an asset, a really solid archive of how things used to be done." I looked at the folder on the table in front of him. It was glossy, black, and too thick for comfort. "The exit packet," I said flatly. "We're pivoting," Bradley said, using the buzzword like a shield. "We're going leaner, more agile. The supply chain needs a digital-first approach, and we feel your skill set is, well, it's very traditional. Think of this as a chance for reinvention." I reached out and pulled the folder toward me. I opened it. The severance was shockingly generous. 6 months of base pay, my full bonus for the year included. My vesting stock options were left untouched. It was a golden parachute designed to push me out the door without a scream. I looked up, squinting at him. "You want me out happy, or you want me out quiet?" Bradley smirked, leaning back in his chair like a man who thought he had just invented chess. "I want you to land on your feet, Sarah. No bad blood. It's just business." It wasn't mercy, it was insurance. He knew I knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. He was paying for my silence. "But you forgot one crucial thing," I thought, the words echoing in my mind like a drumbeat. "You think money is the only currency I have." "I understand," I said aloud. My voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "I appreciate the generous offer, Bradley." I picked up the pen. my hand didn't shake. I signed the separation agreement with a calm hand and a throat full of battery acid. I signed away my right to sue for wrongful termination. I signed away my right to disparage the company publicly. But I didn't sign away my memory, and I certainly didn't sign away my assets. I stood up, shook his hand, which felt soft and damp, and walked out. I didn't say goodbye to my team. I didn't clear out my personal items in front of them. I had already packed a single box. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and descended 40 floors into my new life. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of the tires on the pavement and the rising roar of adrenaline in my ears. When I got home, Mark was waiting in the kitchen. He took one look at my face and poured a glass of Shiraz, a bottle older than Bradley's entire social media presence. "To new beginnings?" he asked tentatively. "Not yet," I said. I took the wine glass and walked straight to the master bedroom closet. I pushed aside the hanging winter coats and reached for the top shelf, behind a stack of old hat boxes. I pulled down a plain, manila folder I had kept hidden there for 6 months. On the tab, in my own handwriting, it read, "Project Emoji Confidential." Bradley didn't know the real game had started before he even got his office nameplate. He thought he was cutting dead weight. He had no idea he had just severed the anchor that was keeping his ship from drifting into a hurricane. To understand why I had that folder, you have to understand what I gave up for Whitmore Corporation. I missed my 10th wedding anniversary because of a port strike in Long Beach that threatened to delay our holiday shipment. I missed my niece's graduation because of a supplier bankruptcy in Vietnam. And, most unforgivably, I was on a conference call negotiating freight rates in the hospital hallway while my father took his last breaths. I justified it at the time. I told myself I was building something. I told myself that the company was my family, too. Robert Whitmore, the CEO and Bradley's father, had sent flowers to the funeral. Standard lilies. The card was signed by his assistant. That was the moment the illusion cracked, but the shatter point came when Bradley arrived. Bradley was a rumor before he was a reality. We heard about his failed startups, a luxury water brand that failed FDA testing, a tech incubator that never actually incubated anything. Rumor was his last job lasted 9 months, ending in a mutual decision after someone found his pitch deck had been plagiarized from a YouTube dropshipper. When he arrived at Whitmore Corp., he didn't come to learn. He came to conquer. He walked through the halls treating department heads like concierge staff. He made inappropriate comments about the aging workforce. He openly scrutinized my expense reports for client dinners while expensing consultation retreats to Cabo for himself and his friends. But his biggest mistake wasn't his arrogance. It was his ignorance. He saw the supply chain as a line on a graph. He didn't understand that it was a living, breathing ecosystem built on relationships, handshakes, and trust. Specifically, he didn't understand our relationship with Moga Logistics. Moga was the beating heart of our operation. They handled 80% of our freight, warehousing, and last-mile delivery. We were their biggest client, and they were our only lifeline. Bradley didn't know that Moga's founder, Vince Caldwell, was going through a messy divorce. He didn't know Vince was looking for a way out, tired of the grind, tired of the demons that haunted the industry. I did. While Bradley was busy designing his new office and picking out ergonomic chairs, I had been flying to Houston on weekends. I remembered the last trip vividly. It was a Monday morning, a sick day from work. I walked into a nondescript office building 2 hours south of the city. No logos, no receptionist, just a keypad door and a flickering fluorescent bulb in the hallway that buzzed like it was in pain. Vince Caldwell met me in the break room. If you could call a room with a dying Keurig machine and a lopsided vending machine a break room. Vince looked like an aging longshoreman in a wrinkled Henley and boots that hadn't seen polish since the Obama era. "You sure you want this headache, Sarah?" he had asked, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You know, once you buy in, you inherit every problem. The unions, the fuel surcharges, the debt. It's a heavy load. I had smiled, taking a seat on a plastic folding chair. I'm a woman in logistics, Vince. I've already danced with the devil. This is just his cousin. He barked a laugh, a dry, rasping sound. Then he tossed a folder onto the scarred table between us. 51%, all yours, pending wire confirmation. It had taken everything I had. I transferred the funds from 3 accounts right there on my phone. My entire savings. A quiet liquidation of an old investment I made back when Bitcoin was still something you explained at parties. And the third source, a loan from a ghost. My late sister's trust fund, which I swore I'd never touch unless blood was in the water. Bradley's blood was in the water now, and it tasted like pistachio smoothie. I sat on my bed, the MOGA folder open on my lap. The documents were signed. The transfer was complete. I wasn't just an unemployed director. I was the majority owner of the company that moved every single product Bradley Whitmore tried to sell. He had fired his supply chain director, but he had just declared war on his supply chain owner. Monday morning arrived like a quiet detonation. I hadn't slept the night before. Too much adrenaline, too much planning. I watched the sun bleed through the blinds while running numbers, margins, and projections on my laptop. The severance Bradley thought would silence me had just become my war chest. It was like handing your firing squad the gun and realizing you still had the bullets in your pocket. By 8:04 a.m., I was officially listed in MOGA's internal system as the interim chair. By 9:30 a.m., I had my first conference call with the MOGA board, a group of 3 gruff men who were just happy someone else was steering the ship. "So, what's the play, Sarah?" one of them asked. "We keep running business as usual." "No," I said, my voice clear over the speakerphone. "We restructure. Effective immediately, we are implementing a volume congestion and strategic realignment protocol." "That sounds fancy for slowing things down," he grunted. "It is," I replied. "Specifically for clients who don't meet our new Tier 1 partnership criteria, we need to audit our contracts, starting with the biggest one." I didn't need to say the name. They knew who I meant. By 2:10 p.m., I was drafting the freight restructuring letter that would land on my old company's desk like a wrecking ball wrapped in velvet. The beauty of it was that there were no legal fireworks, no theatrics. Just a quiet, contractual notification of an 18% rate increase and a sudden, mysterious pause on all preferred scheduling due to unforeseen capacity limits. Bradley wouldn't see it coming. He probably didn't even know MOGA by name. Procurement handled those details, which meant he'd feel the fallout before he ever identified the storm's eye. His transformation was about to hit a very literal roadblocks. But something else happened before I could finish savoring the move. At 3:26 p.m., my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Houston area code. I let it ring, then it buzzed again, this time a text. "We should talk, your move didn't go unnoticed. K." I stared at the screen. K was all it said. Not Vince, not anyone on the MOGA board, just K. My stomach twisted, because there was only one person in my life who signed off as K. Katrina Whitmore, Bradley's mother, the CEO's ex-wife. The woman who once whispered to me in a conference lounge after a merger summit, "You know you're smarter than all of them, right? You just hide it too well." I hadn't spoken to her in 6 years. Not since she disappeared after the divorce, after she was quietly bought out of her 12% ownership in the company. She was a legend, a ghost story told to interns. The fact that she was reaching out now, that she knew what I'd done. Either I'd made a mistake, or someone else had been planning a war long before I even picked up my sword. And maybe I just stepped into her battlefield. I didn't respond to her text. Not yet. Instead, I went for a walk. Not the meditative, clarity-seeking kind. The kind where your body moves but your mind is a furnace. Every step echoing with questions I didn't want answers to. Why now? Why her? How did she know? There were only 5 people at Moga who knew I was the new majority owner, and none of them had any reason to leak it. I hadn't even signed the public filings yet, which meant either Katrina had someone on the inside or she was the inside. Back in the day, Katrina Whitmore was more feared than her husband and twice as respected. She built the brand, ran marketing like a mob boss in pearls. Employees called her the Velvet Guillotine because if she wanted you gone, you wouldn't even feel the cut until you saw your email bounce back. Then she vanished. No LinkedIn activity, no PR statements, just a footnote in a quarterly filing and a few whispers about the settlement that bought her silence. Until now. At 5:12 p.m. I cracked. I sent a reply. Me, what do you want? The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then her message landed like a silk-wrapped dagger. K, dinner, just you, me, and some overdue honesty. Tomorrow, Bellamy's, 7 sharp. You'll want to hear this. I stared at the screen. Bellamy's wasn't just a restaurant. It was the restaurant. The place where power dined with secrets and nobody ever asked for the wine list because the sommelier already knew your tells. She debooked it on a Tuesday. That wasn't a meeting. That was a move, and I played right into it. At 7:03 p.m. the next evening, Katrina was already seated in a corner booth, swirling something red and ruinously expensive in a glass the size of a baptismal font. She looked untouched by time, like she'd made a deal with the devil and then brokered his second divorce. Her hair was a silver blonde helmet of perfection, and her suit was sharper than my entire resume. I slid into the booth across from her. She didn't speak, just slid a small envelope across the table. No words, no preamble. I opened it. Inside were 3 photos. 1, Bradley shaking hands with Vince Caldwell, the former owner of Moga. 2, a scanned stock transfer agreement dated 2 weeks before my B. I out. 3, an email chain between Bradley and someone named Harrison Drake, Whitmore Corp's CFO, discussing partial acquisition for vertical integration. I felt the blood drain from my arms. He tried to beat you to it, Katrina said finally, her voice like ash over velvet. But he's too arrogant to check who held the swing shares. That's why your timing mattered. You didn't just buy 51% of Moga. You blocked his consolidation plan. I blinked, dry-mouthed. He wanted to acquire Moga for your ex-husband's company. She nodded. Bradley's little transformation plan. It's not about leanness, Sarah. It's about leverage. He wanted control of the supply chain so he could gut it, inflate the value, and cash out in 2 years with a golden parachute. He was going to strip Moga for parts and leave the logistics in ruins. She paused, taking a sip of wine. You ruined that. I leaned back, my mind racing. So what's this, you gloating? Katrina smiled, not kindly. This is an offer. I raised an eyebrow. You keep Moga, she said, but I want in. 5%. Silent partner, you front the moves, I feed you intel. And in 6 months, you'll have him dangling by strings he thinks he tied himself. I laughed a bitter, short sound. Why would I trust you? You're a Whitmore. Her eyes hardened, the temperature at the table dropping 10 degrees. Because I hate my son's father more than you do, and seeing Bradley fail is the only way to hurt Robert. For a second, the table was a no-man's land between 2 women who'd both bled for the same throne. And then, slowly, I reached for the wine menu. If we were going to burn this dynasty down, we'd need something decent to toast with. The first strike came 3 days later, and it didn't come from Bradley. It came from accounting. An internal audit request hit Moga like a sniper round. Clean, precise, and right between the eyes. Clarification of vendor ownership relationships. It said neutral language, but the subtext was neon. Bradley knew, or at least he suspected someone had tipped him off. Probably Harrison Drake, his sad excuse for a CFO who had all the spine of a beige curtain and none of the discretion. I could practically hear the weasel's voice in the boardroom. There's been a development. That's when the phone calls started. Procurement leads I used to work with, warehouse managers, even a junior logistics analyst I trained 3 years ago sent me a panicked DM. Hey Sarah, is it true you own Moga now? I heard from Devin in ops. He said you're pulling freight away from Whitmore Corp. Please tell me you're not going to tank our department. And just like that, I realized the most powerful weapon Bradley had wasn't money or position. It was fear. Fear in the ranks. Fear in whispers. Fear that if they sided with the wrong legacy, they'd be purged by whichever god came out on top. I called Katrina. He knows. He's trying to turn the staff against me. Good, she said. Let him panic. Now you hit him back, hard. I told you he'd sniff it out, Katrina said, her voice flat over the phone. He's not smart, but he's paranoid, and that makes him dangerous. I was pacing my apartment barefoot, wine glass untouched, windows wide open to the storm rolling in. So, what's next? He's going to play victim, she said. Board sympathy, spin the narrative, you're the unstable ex-employee lashing out. He'll call it revenge, say you're emotionally compromised. I rubbed my temples. That would land if I hadn't just negotiated 3 new bulk routes and cut Moga's shipping loss by 8%. Katrina's voice dipped to a whisper. Sarah, you need to hit him personally. Professional threats he can navigate with lawyers, but humiliate him, undermine him in front of the board, that he can't survive. I didn't respond immediately, but the next morning I made a call to Gerald Finn. Gerald was the owner of FinTech Distribution, one of Whitmore Corp's biggest clients. More importantly, he hated Bradley. 2 years ago, Brad got drunk at a Vegas expo and told Gerald his wife looked like a discount Ivanka. Word traveled. Contracts strained. But Gerald stayed, mostly out of inertia. Until now. When I met him for coffee, I didn't pitch anything. I just slid a paper across the table. Moga's new exclusive distribution rates. 10% lower than anything Whitmore could match, with guaranteed on-time delivery and 0 surcharge fluctuations for 18 months. Gerald looked at the paper, then at me. He finally stepped on the wrong throat, huh? I sipped my latte. I'm offering you the boot to finish the job. He signed that afternoon. By Friday, Whitmore's logistics team was in full panic mode. An email leaked God bless the interns with the subject line, urgent, FinTech ON pause. Who approved this? Bradley hadn't shown up to HQ in 2 days. Rumors said he was working remote. Translation, sweating bullets in his overpriced loft and probably blaming everyone but himself. Ekend, I got a courier envelope. No return address, just my name in capital letters. Inside, a single Polaroid photo. Bradley, shirtless, holding a tumbler of whiskey in one hand, the other arm around someone disturbingly familiar. Harrison Drake. The timestamp read, last Thursday, 3:44 a.m. Scrawled on the back in looping ink, everyone has leverage, you just have to decide where to press. K. It hit me then. Katrina wasn't just feeding me intel. She was orchestrating a symphony of destruction, and I was just the loudest instrument in her arrangement. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the photo, though the sight of Bradley half-drunk and draped around his own CFO like a frat boy mid-breakdown was grotesquely fascinating, but because of what it meant. The Polaroid wasn't blackmail. It was a message. Katrina was telling me she had surveillance, that she was watching every move, every shadow, every secret. But here's the problem with brilliant conspirators. They forget not everyone likes being a pawn, even if the game favors them. Sunday afternoon, I called her. I want the truth, I said. No greeting, no warm-up. How long have you been planning this? She didn't miss a beat. Since the day Whitmore Sr. called me a brand liability and offered to pay me to disappear. I gripped the phone tighter. You waited 6 years. I waited for the right kind of storm, she said coolly, and then you showed up like lightning in a bottle. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. And what happens after we burn it all down? You just want revenge. Her pause was short but telling. I want my company back, Sarah. Not in name, not on paper, but in truth, and I don't care who has to fall to get it. That was the first time I felt it. Hesitation. Because the way she said fall, it wasn't metaphorical. Katrina was playing for keeps, and if I wasn't careful, I'd end up collateral damage wearing a crown I didn't ask for. But I didn't back out. Not yet. Because just as she'd manipulated me into pushing the first domino, Bradley had started pushing back. Monday morning, I got the ping. New email in your inbox. Subject, urgent MOGA vendor suspension. I opened it. Bradley had frozen all Mogapos, claimed discrepancies in quality assurance, and cited a non-existent audit report. Effective immediately, Moga was under performance review. Orders halted. Payments paused. Communication to be rerouted through legal. It was a corporate siege. I grinned, because what Bradley didn't know was that I'd already rerouted half those deliveries through shell vendors I owned via a holding company. Same shipments, different labels. His suspension meant nothing to the trucks already unloading behind his warehouses. But optics were everything. I needed to respond, so I did, publicly. I drafted an open letter. Simple, elegant, lethal. At Moga, we stand by our standards and our service. The delay in delivery caused by internal policy shifts within client organizations does not reflect our logistics performance, but their internal disarray. We remain ready and capable to serve all contracts currently under agreement. We will not, however, compromise on integrity or transparency. I hit send at 2:13 p.m. By 2:26 p.m., Whitmore Meltdown was trending on Twitter. By 3:00 p.m., two other major clients reached out to Moga directly, asking if they could bypass Whitmore Corp and source directly. At 4:07 p.m., Katrina texted, "Well played, Queen. He's pacing in his father's office calling it sabotage. Guess what? Daddy's siding with the board." Then a second message followed. Also, he just had a visitor. Attached was a grainy still from a security cam. Bradley in his office, standing across from a lawyer in a slate gray suit, the kind of suit that comes with partners and exit clauses. I stared at it the way one stares at an oncoming train, too fascinated to move. He was lawyering up. The idiot thought he could sue me, and I was going to let him try. The lawsuit hit my inbox at 8:01 a.m. sharp, like it had been scheduled by a vengeance-obsessed intern. Subject, Whitmore Corp v. Sarah, preliminary injunction notice. It read like a soap opera written by an angry trust fund baby. Malicious interference, corporate espionage, conflicts of interest, and my personal favorite, emotional instability resulting in retaliatory acquisition. I half expected it to accuse me of casting spells and boiling rabbits. I read it 3 times, slower with each pass. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to stall. If the court granted even a temporary injunction, it could freeze Moga's ability to sign new contracts for weeks. And Bradley knew exactly which partnerships I was finalizing. He wanted to jam the gears long enough to flood the board with chaos until Daddy swooped in, declared him the wounded hero, and slapped my name across a press release like a cautionary tale. But here's what he didn't know. I wasn't just the defendant. I had receipt. At noon, my attorney, a woman named Eliza Hart, whose entire career could be summarized by the words unflinching, unbothered, undefeated, and I walked into the Whitmore Tower like we were hunting vampires. The board had been summoned. Emergency session. Bradley thought he was going to ambush me in front of them. Instead, Eliza handed out slim black folders like party favors. Inside each was a timeline, detailed, dated, sourced. Exhibits of Bradley's unauthorized communication with Moga's former CFO. His hack attempts to inflate shipping costs and reroute inventory through a company he was quietly trying to acquire with offshore proxies. We traced the ownership chain 2 layers deep, then deeper. At the bottom was a holding company, and at the bottom of that was Bradley's name, misspelled but notarized. He didn't just plan to acquire Moga. He tried to buy it out from under his own father. When the documents hit the table, the room turned to stone. You could hear a hairpin debate its life choices. Bradley stammered, This is taken out of context. You were defrauding your own company. Eliza said, her voice clean as a guillotine blade. And the woman you tried to bury beat you to the grave and started renting out the dirt. He turned red, full tomato, his throat bobbing like a hooked fish. But she orchestrated this. She bought out Moga to sabotage us. I stepped forward. Correction, I bought Moga to survive. You made it sabotage when you tried to gut my career and carve it up for parts. You started this war thinking I'd die quietly. And now, here we are. The board said nothing, but their eyes said everything. And then came the moment that told me I'd won the room. His father, Robert Whitmore, finally leaned forward, removed his glasses, and said, "Bradley, son, step outside." "Now, Dad." "Now." Bradley shot daggers at me as he left, but his face had already cracked. The spoiled child behind the title had surfaced. Then Robert turned to me. "You planned this." "No," I said calmly. "He did, I just had better aim." A long silence followed. Then he asked, "What would it take to make this go away?" That's when I saw it. Not regret, not shock. Fear. He knew this wasn't just a PR disaster. This was criminal shareholder lawsuits, regulatory inquiries, SEC scrutiny. And if I wanted to, I could burn them to ash. I leaned in. I don't want money. I don't want hush deals. I want a clean separation. Full dissolution of Whitmore's ties to Moga publicly stated. And Bradley, I want his resignation on paper. His jaw clenched. "You're not leaving me much room." "No," I said, "but I am leaving you a company." He nodded once, then handed me a pen. The statement hit the wires 36 hours later. Effective immediately, Bradley Whitmore stepped down from his role at Whitmore Corporation to pursue new opportunities. The board thanked him for his contributions during a time of transition. Classic corporate obituary language. No mention of lawsuits, no mention of Moga, and definitely no mention of the fact that Bradley left the building escorted by security, screaming into a Bluetooth earpiece like a reality TV contestant on the brink of a breakdown. The board had done their part. They swallowed the medicine. In exchange, I signed the release that killed the lawsuit. Sealed, mutual, sterilized. But something didn't sit right. It should have felt like victory. I should have been popping champagne with Katrina and watching the LinkedIn think pieces roll in. Female exec dismantles nepotism one freight contract at a time. Instead, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, staring at the dashboard like it owed me answers. Because something still didn't track. Bradley was a spoiled narcissist. Yes, a clown in loafers? Absolutely. But not this sloppy. Not the kind of man who leaves notarized trails and tangled proxies unless someone wanted him to, unless someone sharpened the blade for him. My phone buzzed, unknown number again, this time a voicemail. Katrina's voice, but low, almost confessional. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm probably out of pocket. I did what I had to do. Sarah, that company was mine before Robert married it away. I needed a fall guy. And Brad was born to play the role, but don't look so shocked. You got what you wanted. Now take it and walk away." I froze. The temperature in the car dropped 10 degrees. She used me. Every move, every leak, every whisper in the boardroom. Katrina didn't just want revenge. She wanted resurrection. And she built it on a pyre made of her own son. And I was the match. I drove to Bellamy's, her old meeting ground. It was closed, too early for dinner service. But taped to the door was a plain envelope. Inside was a single page, signed and notarized. Transfer of ownership, 12% of Moga Holdings, to Sarah Tane, from Katrina Whitmore. I stared at the paper, my heart beat like a war drum. I now own. D63% of Moga alone. No partners, no backers. She had vanished off the grid, no social media, no burner line. I even checked the shell trust she'd used to invest. Emptied, dissolved, gone. Katrina Whitmore had burned every trace of herself from the ledger, but she left me with the empire. And the silence was deafening. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no sightings, no goddamn trace of Katrina Whitmore. Moga surged. Clients who once ignored my emails were now begging for contracts. I renegotiated shipping corridors, automated half the routing system, and poached Whitmore Corp's former logistics director. He quit with a smile and brought his whole team with him. The empire was thriving. But every win tasted like ash because every time I walked into the office, I didn't feel like a queen. I felt like a caretaker of a throne built on blood. Her blood. His. Mine, none of us clean. Then, late one Friday night, just as I was shutting down for the weekend, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in blue ink I recognized instantly. Inside were two things. A photo, old and faded, of Katrina in a hospital bed, smiling weakly with a newborn swaddled in her arms. The name tag on the baby read Bradley Whitmore, 1993. And a letter. Sarah, you were always meant to run it. I just couldn't get there without breaking a few bones, mine included. Bradley wasn't always a monster, but power doesn't forgive softness. I did what I had to do. You did what you had to do. We both carry ghosts now. Here's my final gift. No more strings, no more shadows. You lead now, don't become me. Okay. I sat in my office chair until the sun came up. That photo clutched in my hand like it had a heartbeat. I could sell, I could scale, I could disappear. But I didn't. Monday morning, I walked into the boardroom alone. No lawyers, no allies, just me and the silence Katrina left behind. I pulled up the quarterly report, looked every executive in the eye, and I spoke the only words that mattered. I'm not here to play queen. I'm here to build something that no man, no sun, no ghost can burn again. They nodded slowly, and just like that, the room belonged to me, not inherited, earned. And somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the world, I hope Katrina smiled. Because the woman she used, she's gone. What's left is the architect, and she's just getting started.